I am the technical evangelist for Adobe ColdFusion. Joining me today is Alistair Lee, who is the evangelist for Adobe Connect. And today we're going to be talking about building Adobe Connect pods with Adobe ColdFusion 2021. And for those folks who are not familiar with what Adobe Connect is, I'm actually going to have Alistair take some time and explain what it is, what you can do with it, why it's awesome, why it's powerful, why it's great. So, Alistair, take it away.
Thank you so much, Mark. This will not be an advertisement for Adobe Connect, I promise you that. But if we're talking about building custom pods for Adobe Connect, I did want to make sure that everybody was familiar with what the technology was and how we can go about creating some of these custom pods. It looked like about half of the people were completely new based on that poll Mark had in the lobby to Adobe Connect. So Adobe Connect is a web conferencing platform, but at a baser level, it really is a set of web technologies, essentially, that enable things like virtual classrooms and webinars. As Mark said, it is what we're using right now to deliver the session today. What's important to note about Adobe Connect and what's very different from some of the other platforms like Zoom or Teams or BlueJeans, if you're familiar with some of those, is that Adobe Connect works a little differently. There are two fundamental concepts that you should be familiar with. One is that all of the functionality in Adobe Connect is delivered through what are called pods. And so if I wanted to add my video, my camera, my webcam onto the screen, I would go and add the video pod. And as a host, I can decide where this pod should be on my stage. So if I want it to be huge and take up the center of the stage, because that is the type of person I am, I can absolutely do that. The host in an Adobe Connect room has complete control over the look and the feel of that room. So in other words, a participant who's joining can't move this pod. They can't decide to hide the pod. They can't make it bigger or smaller or change where it is on the screen. So it is the host that decides how big and how small these pods are, where they are, and whether everybody else in the room is seeing those pods. And there are pods not only for sharing your video, obviously, but there's an attendees pod. If I want to see who else is in the room with me, I can add my attendees pod. Again, I can choose where these should go on my stage. We've got pods for chat, for sharing files. I think Mark had a web links pod on one of his layouts as well to link out to some resources. People can click any links that you add here. We've got pods for polls, for Q&A, which is like moderated chat, as well as an engagement dashboard to see how engaged people are, a notes pod to have a set of shared notes, as well as a share pod that we can use, if I add my share pod here, to do things like share our screen and upload documents to a share pod, like PowerPoint and PDF, images, PNG, JPEG, GIF, music, MP3 files, MP4 video, and HTML, which is what we're going to be talking about later today. We'll get back to that in a second. So it is these pods that determine what functionality you're using in Adobe Connect at any given time. And then down the right-hand side here, I'm seeing what are called layouts. And a layout is essentially just a grouping of pods. So I've got a layout for a lobby, similar to what we had in today's session. If you joined early, you saw a clock in the corner and kind of a welcome image, a chat pod and a poll. We want to have something for people to do when they join our session. Things like interactive pods help keep the engagement levels high. And then when I'm ready to start, I've got an introduction layout where I add video, introduce myself, maybe cover some housekeeping, then move to a slides layout where I have my slide content. By uploading it, I can do things like see my speaker notes or switch to a different slide in my deck really quickly. So these are kind of the fundamental principles of Adobe Connect, a set of pods to deliver the functionality and a set of layouts that you create to create really the experience behind the room that you're in. So I'm thinking about, what do I want the flow of my virtual classroom or my webinar to be? And just like you could storyboard out a movie, you can create these interactive storyboards as your layouts to kind of go from one set of pods to another set of pods. Where things get really interesting, from my perspective, is with that share pod. So I'm sharing some PowerPoint content here. But as I said, this supports a bunch of different content types. So in addition to PowerPoint, supports PDF documents, MP4 videos, MP3 audio, images. The other thing that I can upload to this SharePod, though, is a zip file. And that zip file can include HTML content, not just HTML, but JavaScript, CSS. You can essentially package up a small little website or a web application and load it into a SharePod the same way that you would load in a PowerPoint file or a PDF or a song if you had some audio. And so what this means is, if I scroll down to my pods layout here, and this is a very busy, very, very busy layout here, because I wanted to show a bunch of different examples of the types of pods that I've created. And I am not a developer, but very easy to create HTML-based applications that get loaded into your Adobe Connect room. So some examples here, I've got a clock in the top left-hand corner. Below that is a countdown timer, so we can let everybody know when a session is going to begin. I can start that. I've got my own custom chat pod, because I didn't like the fact that I couldn't upvote messages in the standard chat pod. I didn't like the fact that everybody's default color was gray, so I wrote my own chat pod. I've got a YouTube player here, a quiz game where I can select some trivia or upload my own custom trivia and have everybody compete to answer questions quickly. A little stage lights timer, a soundboard. Mark, I really need to get this into your room. I don't think you can hear that, but you can have, a laugh track, a punchline, a sad horn in the case of my jokes, play for everybody. So lots of different types of functionality. The other part of this is that in addition to being able to upload HTML content, we can synchronize some of this HTML content. So some pods, like this clock pod, for example, are not synchronized at all. This is just pure HTML. This is not using anything from Adobe Connect. There's no SDK involved here, because I just need the same experience for all of my participants. I just want them to run my JavaScript and my HTML and my CSS. That's all this does. In some cases, though, like this meeting timer, for example, or this very, very simple title pod where I can add my own titles that will be seen by everybody, I want that to be synchronized. I want, as a host, to be able to add my own title and have everybody in my room see the title that I've just added. Or if I load a YouTube video into the YouTube pod, I don't want that to be just seen by me. The reason I'm doing that is so that everybody can see that YouTube video. So the way that we typically do this is with something called the Adobe Connect SDK, or the Software Developer Kit, that allows these pods to be aware that they're running inside of an Adobe Connect room. And when we use that, we can do things like change the functionality based on role. So as I demote myself to a participant here, you'll notice my soundboard pod goes completely invisible. I'm no longer able to edit the text. I'm no longer able to set the timer. So that SDK allows us to see what role people are playing, to change behavior based on role, but it also allows us to send these synchronized messages to everybody else in the room. And that's one way that we can keep everything synchronized. The other way, and I think what Mark is going to be talking about today, or I know what Mark is going to be talking about today, is, of course, these are just HTML pods, so they could also point to a centralized server, something like a ColdFusion application running to feed the HTML that's being generated in all of these different pods. And so that's what's really exciting, is to have not just an experience that you're creating inside of these pods, but to use technology like ColdFusion to make that a shared collaborative experience, so that as we update the server, all of the pods running inside of Adobe Connect will also get updated at exactly the same time. So that's essentially how Adobe Connect works and how these pods work. These are all separate instances, for each individual in the room. They're all running their own instance of these pods. And so we need something like a ColdFusion server or the SDK to synchronize them so that they're all seeing exactly the same thing. Otherwise, we'll just be running our own code. Hopefully that works as a quick introduction both to Adobe Connect and to custom pods overall. Mark, I am going to hand it back to you and stop sharing.
Take my mic back. Awesome. Well, that was an awesome and perfect introduction to exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Thank you so much, Alistair. So I'm going to pop myself back into this view. And I will say too, this was actually a really, really nice introduction for people who maybe you've been to a few of my webinars and you've seen Adobe Connect from the viewer's standpoint. And what Alistair was able to show you was really what someone who is at the host or presenter level can do with having a little bit more control and being able to move things around and change layouts. Anyone who went to Dev Week, you probably would have seen that we were constantly changing layouts between the main lobby where everyone was chatting up a storm, and then we'd like move into individual people's speaker rooms, and there would be a different chat there. And so all of these things were designed and controlled by someone, usually me. That whole week I was up a lot with long hours, but we were able to go ahead and kind of run through a storyboard. And that is really the power of this. Connect is something that you can use to tell stories and to really create like highly customized and powerful journeys for people, basically. So let's move in. And Alistair kind of covered this a little bit, but I'm going to go a bit more in depth on what actually makes a pod. How can you put a pod in here? What are the different kinds of pods? How do you get different functionalities? So let's start off with, and by the way, if people are having trouble seeing any of this, if things are a little bit difficult for people, there is in the upper right-hand corner of each of the pods, there should be a little square that you can make it full screen. So if you don't want to see my ugly mug on here and you just want to see the code that's in the lower right, at full screen, you can go ahead and hit that, and it will it'll just pull it up to show you at full screen. So what are we looking at here? What I've done is I've opened up a custom pod that I made that is literally a hello world example of what you can put into a pod to just kind of have it do, almost nothing, basically. And what I'm going to do here, actually, is I'm going to change my pod layout just a tiny bit, just so I can add a share. And I'm going to pull this in so that everyone can see it. So here is an empty share. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go up to Document, and you can't see me doing this right now, but I'm going to go to Document. And in my documents, I've actually already done this. I've uploaded a file called Hello World. And it is here. And then I'm going to hit share. And it's going to come up and boom, there we go. Super exciting. I know. Calm down, everyone. It's just saying Hello World. So what is making this say Hello World? Well, anyone who, by the way, has done any kind of phone gap development, anything with like with Apache Cordova, Monica, anything like that, you might be a little bit familiar with how this works. So essentially what these pods do is they live inside of a viewport that's a native view inside of Connect. Just the same way that when you build with HTML5 for phones, you build out a somewhat specific, but generally speaking, generalized HTML5 based and JavaScript and CSS based website. That is, it's kind of like, I mean, I prefer to do them as single page apps. You can do them in different ways. But what we have here is we've got a web page. Doc type is HTML. It's an HTML5 page. I'm including a styles link. Okay, and I'll open that up. So the styles are just CSS. Nothing fancy here. This is just regular old CSS3 background repeats. I put the background as this kind of nice blue fade just to make it look neat, but that could be anything. It could be a local image. It could be a remote image. It could be, like I said, anything, any kind of color or gradient. And we go down. We've got a viewport line here, and then a title, which actually you don't end up seeing anywhere, so it's not that important. And then I actually am using some styles here that were created by Alistair for a different pod. So you could literally make it even simpler than this. You could just have it say div hello world, and it would just be a blank background with hello world. I wanted it to be a little bit prettier than that. So that's really it. And then what you'll do is you'll zip up the folder and you'll upload it to Connect to be shown. And that's it, right? No. One last very, very important thing, and this is the thing that makes this a little bit different. And this also kind of falls into how you make, for example, phone gap apps. There is this file here. It's called Breeze Manifest. And this file describes everything that is inside of your package that's being uploaded up into Connect. And it's incredibly important. If the files that you're uploading are not properly described here, Connect will not allow them to be displayed. In fact, if you have a file listed here that doesn't exist in what you've sent up, it won't even display. It won't even display the pod at all. You'll get a big error that says, "Nope, you're not allowed to do it." So what am I uploading here? Well, this is a pretty simple thing, right? So we've just got the index file, and that's what is the entry file, by the way. So the first thing that ends up getting viewed, it doesn't have to be index. It could be some other thing inside of your site that you want to get displayed first. And you can name it literally anything you want. In this case, I just named it index because I'm boring and predictable like that. Then you're actually saying, okay, the file is index. Now this is something too. This is not really a file, right, folks? This is a folder, but it's important for the Breeze Manifest to describe what the structure is that's going in so that it's aware of it. Again, I'm not exactly sure what the reasoning behind this is. Maybe Alistair can come back on later and give us a little bit of a heads up on exactly why they do it. I'm assuming it's for security, probably for performance too. And then I've got the style file. And then, so this is actually funny. What's funny is this is actually broken here. I must have been editing this. So this manifest was from a different thing, and it includes a couple of things that we'll be showing later in another folder. So this is actually kind of funny. This would break actually if I uploaded it now. So let's just, what do they say about never doing demos with live code? Okay, there we go. No one saw that. So that is what the manifest would look like. If I tried to put it up there, you wouldn't see anything. Actually, what would happen is the share pod would just stay empty, and I would be embarrassed on my end because it wasn't loading. Cool. Okay, so that's the most basic type of pod. There's really no internet connectivity here. You could be doing this on a computer, like without having, I mean, obviously you need to connect to the Connect servers, obviously, but it's not pulling anything from any outside source. So in terms of like this stuff, right? The manifest XML description is not local, but we're not like connecting to an API. We're not connecting to a server somewhere. I'm not pulling, files down from S3. None of that is actually happening. So what if I want to go a little bit more in depth and have a little bit more functionality? Well, let's stay in the browser for now, and we will get into we will get into connecting to a database connected file in a little bit. So let me share this just so you can see it. Sorry, gotta find it. So this looks kind of similar. You've still got the title, but now there's a button in here. And you'll notice if you click the Add Pup button, if I did this correctly, let me just click it myself, you'll get a little image of a puppy. And if you just keep clicking it, you'll just get infinite numbers of puppies until your machine crashes because it runs out of RAM. One thing to notice, though, and this is important because this is related to something that Alistair said earlier, all of you can be clicking this button and adding your puppies, but those are all your puppies. Those are all of that interaction is happening local to you only. This is not being shared with everyone else. Like if you didn't touch anything, you probably just don't see anything up there. But on my screen, I have about 20 puppies on my screen. So this is something that is important to realize about Connect, that in sort of the base mode, when you're not using the SDK, when you're not using any kind of connectivity back to a server to display what's on here, the stuff that happens on the screen is the stuff that is just going to be for you. So for example, what is this useful for? Like someone could have a notes app. You could build a little notes app for someone who wants to take some notes and maybe email them to themselves or something along those lines. But they only want those notes to be visible to them. They don't want everyone else seeing it. You could have that. You could have something where you want to count the number of times that Mark says incredible. So you could have a button that every time I say incredible, a number goes up, right? But you don't want anybody else counting or seeing that number, that kind of thing. That's the use case for this. And so just real quickly, what does this look like? The file is very, very similar. Again, we've got, just the basic stuff here. And what I've done, though, is I've just added a button here called function add puppy. And what it does is it looks into it. It looks up and it identifies this div, and it changes the inner HTML value of it to whatever is in that value plus image puppy.ping. Okay, and here it is. So it's part of the zip. It's part of the folder. It's not actually getting this out from somewhere else. It's not going to S3 or any kind of bucket online. It's just pulling it locally, and it's just continually adding more and more and more puppies, which, to be honest, is a great thing. Cool. Okay. So just real quick, also, what does the Breeze manifest look like? I think I was editing the wrong manifest earlier. I think I moved the manifest over because this manifest should actually have the puppies in here. Sorry, that's my bad. Again, live code. So this really should, I'm going to go ahead and add it. I'm going to add file href is equal to image, and file href is equal to image, let's see, puppy dot png. Okay, there we go. Now, if I were to upload this, the manifest matches what's in there, and it'll be able to display it, and everyone's happy and has all the puppies they want. But what if you want to have something that's shareable and everyone can see it, and have something where you can actually change things around? Okay, this is where things get a little bit more technical, and this is where we actually start talking about ColdFusion. 7 minutes in. But it's important that we had this sort of preview, because it makes it more important to understand like why you would actually be doing this. The ColdFusion stuff, honestly, is kind of easy and plugs into this really, really well. It's just a really great use case. So let's jump into that and view. I'm going to stop sharing this, and I am going to pull up my I think it is this one. Okay. Actually, that is not the right one. Sorry. Sorry, my list is like completely and utterly full of things. Here we go. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, so what is this? This is a schedule pod from Adobe Developer, Adobe ColdFusion Developer 2022. Some of you may have been there. You probably saw this pod up there and thought, oh, okay, that's neat. Like they've got a pod that's got the schedules in it and whatever. Well, something that was not happening at that time was any kind of live interactivity, any kind of database backend for this or anything like that. Literally before, what this looked like was that basically we had, we had data in JSON that was uploaded to Connect, and it was locally pulling this JSON in, and it was listing out the sessions. So that's how we were doing it before. And as the days changed, as we went on, I just literally went in and I deleted parts of the JSON and I uploaded the new schedule to it. So since I had to do that for an entire week and I got annoyed at it, I decided, you know, it'd be really cool would be if you can go in and actually edit these sessions and what goes into them dynamically in a database and have them show up here. And that was sort of the impetus for this entire talk today. So how does this do this now? Well, currently, let me jump in and go. And by the way, you'll notice the name of this is sidebar.htm. It is not index. So inside of the Breeze manifest, the entry is sidebar.htm. Just wanted to point that out. As I said earlier, it doesn't have to be index that shows up the first thing. So what does this page look like? Okay, now it's a little bit different. And I used a couple of different technologies here. I did not use the SDK, to be clear. I decided that since like this talk was coming up really soon, I needed to get it done, and I didn't know enough about the SDK to be confident that I could make it work. So I just made it work the way that I did, which really just speaks to the flexibility of this tooling. It allows you to kind of do things the way you want to do them. So what am I using here? So I've got jQuery. Cool. I've got a little bit of jQuery. And I also have a technology called HTMX, which I've done a bunch of talks on. If you're interested, I can point you to some talks that go more in depth into actually building single-page applications using HTMX. The short explanation of what HTMX lets you do is it lets you target something like a div or a span, and it lets you fill that object with something from another page somewhere else. And that page can be local on the server that you're on. It can be a server out in the cloud. It could be on the moon, wherever you want it to pull in from. It can do that, and it can do that asynchronously. You can do it based on triggers. You can do it based on timing, however you want to do it. So I'm using that instead of the SDK to do updates into the container that contains all of this data here. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so let's look at this. So a little bit of difference here. We actually have a header. That's this up here. So we're just displaying an image. And by the way, the image has some styling for it that lets it kind of responsively change its size. I can show you if I move this around. It gets smaller, it gets bigger. So that's really nice. As you all know, Connect is very responsive. It fits the size of whatever container it's in. And so it's important to make sure that when you're coding and you're developing, it's very similar to mobile first development, right? Think about Connect as essentially a mobile view. Because you can't really be sure what size that pod is going to be at the end of the day. So you need to be flexible about it, just the same way that you don't know if someone's got an iPhone SE or a new Galaxy Tab or whatever huge giant phone that looks like a stone tablet the size of my head, or a teeny tiny little flip phone of some kind, like the new, full screen flip phones that still can view things like this. So it's kind of similar. Then we get to the meat of it. So here is where the action happens. And again, this is some HTMX stuff, and I'm not going to go too deep into all of the different options. I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing here. So I am using this div, and I'm not targeting a different div, by the way. So the default behavior of HTMX is when something gets changed or whatever, it's targeting the thing in which the code exists, right? So the opposite of that is if I had a button to press and the target was a different div that I wanted to load content into. That's how you can actually make a working web application by making a bunch of buttons and targeting a bunch of different divs to use as viewports and loading different content into them. In this case, it's not that fancy. There's no buttons. This is just going to show up. So what I'm doing is I am going over to a file called sessions.cfm, which I am holding up on my website, takatatech.com. Now, if you go there, you'll see something that doesn't look much like this. It just looks like text. Okay, and I can even, here, just to save you all a click, I will actually pull that up there. Takatatech/API sessions. That's what is coming back from my server, right? It's just looks just like text, really boring. But when it's displayed, it looks like, it looks like what you're seeing there in that schedule pod. Okay, so what's happening? So what's happening is the code that is loaded into that div is actually respecting all of the styles that are applied on that page. And this page has styles applied to it that we saw, I think we saw earlier, but I can pull them up again. We've got this styles file that gets loaded in that does all of the, the pink text, the background, the mouse over, some of the layout things. They're all here in this CSS. But of course, that does not exist in this file, this sessions.cfm file. It is just literally pulling down the text, putting it into a few different containers, but those containers classes on the server don't exist, and so they're going to be pulled here. Just trying to explain why this looks so different if you just go directly there. And then what I do is I tell it to trigger first on load. So the first thing I tell it to do is to go out and pull this thing down when it loads. And then I ask it to update itself every 20 seconds. Okay, so this container is going to go to https://takatatech.com/API/sessions.cfm, and it is going to immediately load what's ever there and then refresh itself every 20 seconds. Super cool. What does sessions.cfm do? Here's where the ColdFusion is. And I apologize that it's in tags. You could obviously do this in any kind of ColdFusion that you want. But just remember, whatever you display here, this is not like opening an API and pulling back JSON and having to iterate over structures and bind that to different things. I am literally server-side rendering my content and pulling it into a display port. So a lot of people find this easier. Some people don't. It's kind of just up to you. If you want to pull in JSON, you can do that too. And that is absolutely something you can do inside of the JavaScript framework. You can use fetch. You can set up fetch to go and get your content in however many every couple seconds, whatever you want to do. You could do all that. It's not what I'm doing here. This is a little bit simpler than that. So what am I doing? I'm going over to a database. So on my server up on Takatatech, it's actually hosted in the cloud. I have a MySQL database that holds session day, session name, the UTC time. That's important. I'll get to that in a second. And the speakers that are there. Okay, and we kind of all see that stuff. You've got the session names. You've got the session day, which is day one sessions in this case, the UTC time, speakers. So I do that query, and then I go and I loop through that query. And in my case, and this is all kind of like, this is going to be different for every person, but in my case, I group on session day. So what I do is I look for every single session that has day one sessions as the day, and then I display each of them, and then I move on to the next thing. Cool. Okay, so that's the loop. And inside of the inside loop, so if you all know, looping inside of a grouped structure, you need to have an external loop and an internal loop, and the internal loop takes whatever is not inside of the grouped attribute, and it loops through all of the other things inside of it, right? So that's where I get first session, second session, etc. I actually do a little bit of, this is a little bit ugly. This probably, again, I kind of did this a little bit on short notice because I realized that I needed to do this. One thing that you might notice is, if you think about it, what's an important thing to have in your time when you're talking about time for a session? Well, you kind of want that time to be in your time zone, right? I mean, I do. I think it's very useful. I don't want to have to do math when figuring out what time to go and, watch a session. So if I am generating this time on a server, my server lives, I don't know, somewhere, probably Chicago or Arizona. I'm not sure where my cloud server is that's serving this. But if I were to go get the time from that, it wouldn't be the time of the person watching. They could be anywhere. They could be in Australia or India or the UK, or they could be in California like me. So it's important to have to figure out where that person is to set the time, but it's really not an easy thing to do from server-side technology. Okay, so how would you do it? Well, previously, Alistair actually solved this problem by doing everything in JavaScript. They actually used... my stuff just came.
Sorry, Mark, that was me. I thought we could all see this better since you haven't changed that PowerPoint slide since the beginning. I thought that didn't make me quite so big. Apologies if that screwed you up.
Oh, man. Oh, no, it's okay. So what Alistair did originally was he used like locale, and he just kind of converted it to that. But ColdFusion doesn't really have that because, again, we don't really know. It's a server-side rendered technology. By the time this is rendered, everything's already been, the cake has been baked. Let's just put it that way. However, it's still a really useful functionality. So what I do here, and really what I should have done is written this as a function and then just fed the function in, but that's okay. It's easier for me to show you what it does here inside of this loop, is I take the value of UTC time and I set it as a value inside of some JavaScript. Okay, so what'll happen is I'm sort of priming the pump here, I'm priming the gun, and when this hits the browser is going to see this script and execute it locally in the person's browser, which in this case is the viewport for Connect. So it works exactly the same way. It knows what locale you're in, and it'll be able to convert the time, and that's what we do. So I set the hours, I set the minutes, I do a to locale, and then I actually just have a span here that I set the inner HTML value to dynamically, and we're off to the races. We go do the get session, we do the session name, yada, yada, all that good stuff. Okay, where are we at? 42. I got a few more minutes before I have to ask for questions. So I am going to show you the database real quick here, because I think that's important for you to understand the database structure. 1 second. Sorry, I should have this ready, but I didn't. Schedule admin. Ta-da. Okay, so here we go. We are in PHPMyAdmin. This is a MySQL database. We've got a schedule pod, and just ignore these other tables. I was actually working on other things where you could change the styling dynamically as well, but I never quite got to that, so that's okay. So here is what the content currently is. And you can see the way that it matches what is on here, except, of course, for the time, which has been converted to your local time. Hopefully, if I did that right. If not, I don't know. You can yell at me at Summit if you go to Summit. So cool. Why don't we add something here? So I'm going to copy. I'm going to add a session to day one. Let's do that. So we have got day 1 session, second session. I'm going to put this as third session. I'm going to put this at 25 UTC. And the speaker is going to be, I'm going to make it Alistair. Ha! And I am going to go ahead and have it be active, and I'm going to say go. Okay, so now I have added that. Now what we do is we wait. And if I did this right, what will happen is, remember, this is updating itself every 20 seconds. So I just did it now, depending on when the cycle is for when this gets updated. We should see it. I hope that, has it been 20 seconds? Come on. You can do it. Hopefully I loaded the right. Every time, right? Live code. Let me, why did that not update yet? I swear this works, people. Okay, you know what? I am going to just make sure that I uploaded the correct code because, so, by the way, this is how, this is actually an important part, so I'm glad I can actually show this to you. So the way that you would actually put this in place, so this is the folder that I was working in. So I'm going to go ahead and send this to a zip. Okay, I'm going to move this to my desktop. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing because apparently that didn't work. I don't know why. And I am going to go browse my computer, pull that zip file that I just put in there. You know, I wonder if I broke something. Interesting. Alistair, what am I doing?
So this is maybe a good time to cover how to debug pods that aren't working how you think they should. The easiest way, to be honest, is to run Connect in a browser rather than in the application and open up your developer tools the same way that you would for debugging any other web application. So, you know, if you're running it to the console with your custom pod, that will show up in the developer tools as well. In this case, Mark, I think you're running almost certainly in the application, so it's probably not the best for live debugging. But that's certainly one of the first steps I would take. The other thing that's happening, if the pod won't upload at all, if you're getting some kind of conversion error and it's just not accepting your pod, 90% of the time, maybe more, it's that Breeze manifest file is missing a file or has a typo.
Actually,
well, I think we can see why it's not working right now. It's
not
the pod.
Oh, okay, it's not the pod. So here you go. Here's Mark made a very stupid mistake, and I'm very upset that and no one on here caught me doing it. Come on, people. How many hours are in a day? Is it 25? No, it's not.
Oh, wow, yeah.
That's why. That's why. So let me go back and come on. And let's edit that because that certainly would not work. So let's do, I don't know, 23. So I'm going to go ahead and update that. Now, the interesting thing is really that, now I am not sure. Thank you, Arnold. Arnold saw it. Arnold saw it. I'm going to go ahead and pull this back up because I think the way that Connect works is once it's had an error, it just, yeah, there we go. Oh, interesting. But now day 1 sessions is showing. I swear this has been working all week. I have no idea why it is not grouping now, but this is not a Connect error. This is a Mark coding this incorrectly error. So essentially what it's doing is it's not identifying the day 1 sessions together here. And it absolutely should be based on my code. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Fun times. That's okay. the important thing is we had fun. Uh, so yeah, I'm still assuming it's something that's going on with my, still assuming it's something that's going on with my actual database content for some weird reason. 524, Alistair, day one. Yeah, it's really weird. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Anyway, I am going to go to questions. The first one of which is, why can't Mark program ColdFusion properly today? And the answer is not nearly enough coffee. Yeah, it could be ID order. I mean, the display order, I don't know if I'm actually using that to do anything with. Yeah, I'm not actually pulling that down, so that shouldn't be the issue. It should just group things properly and not, let's see. If I go in here and I pull this up, yeah, see, it's not even doing it there. So like Alistair was saying, the use group by in CF query. Oh, maybe that's what I'm doing wrong. In any case, you all understand, basically, if you know how to program ColdFusion, which apparently today I don't, everything that you can display on the page can end up getting sent into a custom pod, which will update itself. And actually, I'm going to also show, just because I want to show one thing that actually works, I'm going to go ahead and edit something. So here, day one sessions, first session, I'm going to go ahead and edit day one sessions, and I'm going to add edit to the end of it. And I'm going to update it and give it a few seconds, and it should actually update it in and if it doesn't, I'm just going to give up and take more questions. Yes. Aren't you glad you're not a developer, Alistair?
Yes. Yeah.
Good times. Well, it is just not updating for me. So apparently, it's really funny. Actually, good chance for me to take a look. And this is what Alistair was talking about earlier, that you could just go in and do your do some of your debugging. Let's see, network. That's all loading properly. My sources. Oh, you know what? Oh, hold on. You know what this seems like is that I am not actually. Oh, no, that's actually right. So let me. Yeah, I would actually have to load this whole thing. Oh, you know what I can do, though? Ha, ha, ha. By the way, another cool thing that you can do is, all of you who are developing locally, which a lot of us do, I can actually just go right in here and pull this up locally and do an inspection on it without having to have it inside of Connect. So earlier you heard Alistair talking about, you can have Connect in a browser. Well, I'm actually even going further than that. Aha, there it is. That's why. There's an HTMX error. That's why. Yeah. Okay. So this is, again, it's not, I did something in my HTMX that is not working correctly. So that's why it's doing that. I must have been editing something earlier that made it go bad, but I actually think I know what the error is. So I'm going to fix that real quick. So we've got about 8 minutes. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and let me know while I fix this. Desktop.
The other way to force a reload, Mark, in case you're interested for future, if you change to a layout that doesn't include that pod and then come back to the layout that includes the pod, it's going to have to reload that pod. So that would be another way to kind of reload. It's reloading the same content that might include that same bug. May not be the best option, but in a case like this, I think you would get your text updated.
There we go. So I think I just broke it again. What did I break this time? Okay, so I am this time breaking HTMX again. So there you go. Oh, wait a minute. The requested resource.
I think it just needed you took off the load, so it just waited 20 seconds to load it in.
Yes, it took 20 seconds to load. That's why. So it wasn't broken. Cool. Okay, there you go. So that is now it's actually editing, and now that it loaded that, now I can go back to phpMyAdmin, edit that back to not say edit. Go. Okay, now, come on, work for me just once. Just once. I'll be your best friend. There it is. It worked. Okay. I am not as dumb as I look. Just slightly smarter. Cool. Okay, so there you go. Just ignore the guy in the funny glasses over here. So there you go. That is building custom Connect pods. Hopefully you can see it's like the sky's the limit on this. You can put anything you want into these pods. You can build any kind of application you want with a database backend. You can update it. You can have games. You could have a collaborative environment that uses a database to hold the stuff and updates it for everyone. It is really, really awesome. And obviously, if you're using cloud stuff, you can use like S3 buckets. You can use Azure. You could do whatever the heck you want with the back end. This will work with pretty much any technology, but hopefully you're all ColdFusion developers and interested in it because of that. CF makes it much easier, I swear. And in fact, most of the stuff here was issues that I had with other technologies. I'm still not sure why my group by is not working correctly, but I will fix that. All of this stuff, by the way, is included in my, let me put this back. I have a GitHub for folks. If you go there in a few hours, I'm going to go ahead and figure out why my group by was not working, and you'll be able to pull down the content from there. Just a word, though, I will be pulling out my server information because obviously you're going to want to replace that with whatever server you're going to host this on. Is there a way for folks to use Connect, by the way, easily, Alistair, like for personal use or like demos?
So in addition to the free trial that's 30 days, you can actually use it completely for free. There's obviously the free version has very tight capacity restrictions.
Okay.
But in terms of testing, I think that's you can get 3 people in there. It's not a trial. It never expires. It's got all of the functionality.
Awesome.
So you can absolutely use that for testing.
Perfect. Is there something you can link to here? Did you want to pull something up to show people where to go and get the trial or find a link to download the trial?
I was going to link to the SDK in case anybody was interested. I am struggling to find that actually right now. So working with the PM team to get that link a little more visible.
Awesome.
If you go to adobeconnect.com, that is probably the best place to get started. There is an apps page that we link there that includes all of the existing custom pods as well. If you want to be inspired or just want to check out what already exists so that you're not recreating it, that might be another good place to start. apps.adobeconnect.com.
Perfect. Very cool. And then, of course, people will be able to use the Hello World example I've got here, as well as some of the more advanced ones, and pull those down and use those as a place to kick off their custom pod journeys as well. I want to thank everyone. We've just got about 3 more minutes left in the session. If anyone else has any more questions, please feel free. You can also email me questions at takata@adobe.com. Or hit me up on Twitter at Mark Takata. As I said, my GitHub is Mark R. Takata. The R is important. And my LinkedIn, if anyone wants to add me on LinkedIn, please feel free. I'm open to connecting to everyone in the community. It's linkedin.com/in/Mark Takata. I am on CFML Slack as Mark Takata Adobe, so you can connect with me there. And if you want to hop into quick office hours, a 15 or 30 minute slot, please go ahead and go to calendly.com/marktakata, and you can request office hours there for me. I think I may only have Monday ones open. Otherwise, hopefully I will see at least some of you at CF Summit, which is coming up in just over a week in Las Vegas on October 3rd and 4th. Should be a good time. And maybe some of you will also be going to Adobe Learning Summit, which starts on the 4th and is also at the Mirage in Las Vegas and goes for a few days there. Awesome. Thank you all for joining us. Sorry about the programming mishaps, but things happen. Things happen with live code. We did get things working though at the end of the day, and we got some custom pods running. Look for more of these. I'll probably be building more custom pods down the road to make your experiences inside of my webinars more exciting and more engaging. I've been Mark Takata. I am the technical evangelist for Adobe ColdFusion, and thank you once again for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and